So in August of 2025, so very recently, the SEC under Chairman Atkins' leadership announced the launch of a task force on AI that will, and here I'm going to quote the announcement from the SEC, that quote, will spearhead the agency's efforts to enhance innovation and efficiency in its operations through the responsible use of AI. And Valerie Szczepanik, who's with me today, has been named the SEC's Chief AI Officer and is leading the task force. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And you and I have known each other for a long time, going back to my time at the SEC. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say on the role of AI at the SEC and the task force and your role leading the efforts. So I want to start, though, by sticking with what the SEC said during the announcement or in the announcement, which ties into the SEC's ambitions, such as they are. You'll tell us more about that, I'm sure. And also, quite frankly, ties into something that's come up throughout the course of discussions earlier today, which is President Trump's AI action plan from earlier on in the summer. So once again, I'm going to quote from what the SEC announced. So, quote, recognizing the transformative potential of AI, the SEC's AI task force will accelerate AI integration to bolster the SEC's mission. The task force will centralize the agency's efforts and enable internal cross-agency and cross-disciplinary collaboration to navigate the AI lifecycle, remove barriers to progress, focus on AI applications that maximize benefits, and maintain governance. The task force will support innovation from the SEC's divisions and offices and facilitate responsible AI integration across the agency. So all sounds, from my personal perspective, all sounds like pretty good stuff. So with all of that, by way of some wind up, if you could, and if you would, speak to the overall structure, staffing, approach, goals, how the commission, how you, with your role as the SEC Chief AI Officer and leading the task force, how you're pulling all of that together to tackle what is a pretty ambitious agenda as articulated when all of this was announced by the commission recently.
Thanks, Troy, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. A little co-pilot in my brain is reminding me to tell you about our disclaimer, which is these views are my own and not necessarily those of the commission or any of the commissioners or staff. So with that said, I'm really excited to take on this role. It's a new role for me, but I've been at the commission for a long time doing financial innovation work. When I stepped into this role, it became clear to me that there was a lot of activity happening within the commission in silos, which generally happens sometimes in large organizations or government organizations. And so the first thing I needed to do was bring people together and align them around an AI strategy. And the AI strategy that we have, and probably many institutions or entities have the same strategy, is to take a look at your architecture. And are you building an architecture that brings folks together and not only facilitates innovation, but also makes it easy for users who may not be sure about AI to start using it in their everyday work in ways that give them productivity advantages in the short term, but also bringing them along so that they can come to that realization that this technology will change the way they work, will change workflows, will change the way we look at the way we work, and potentially bring benefits across processes that could transform the agency and really bring efficiencies to what we do every day. So looking at, do we have an enterprise architecture that can enable that kind of development, but also bringing development into production? A second layer is around our data. The SEC has a lot of data. It's in different places, it's in different forms, but it's really one of our greatest assets. And if we can learn to build a layer on top of that data that is an intelligence layer, we could do so much more at the commission. We have to do more with less. We've downsized a little bit recently, so I think folks need to have those tools in hand to analyze the data that we have and to draw insights and really do the tasks that we're supposed to do. The third thing we're kind of looking at is identifying those quick wins where we can put AI in the hands of employees at the commission and teach them to use them in ways to really increase their productivity. And so that's very human oriented, but giving them productivity tools to make them more efficient, free up their time to do more human tasks or strategic thinking, or even just engaging with each other and with the industry. And then identifying these larger process transformations. So are there processes that overlie many of the things that we do at the commission, whether it's analyzing big data to find out information that we need about a company, or whether it's ingesting a bunch of public input and analyzing that input in a way that, is more streamlined than we do it now. These things could potentially impact thousands of our employees, and we want to identify those use cases for piloting, for development, and for implementing these solutions. Another thing we're looking at is, of course, education. We want to bring people along. We want to deploy and develop AI in a way that's safe and responsible. We are the stewards of a very important mission at the Commission for investors and for the markets. And so with that mission in mind, we want to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's not going to compromise our data or compromise things we're doing that are non-public. And so we want to do that in a safe way. Education about what AI is capable of, what it's not capable of, how it should be relied upon or not relied upon. And so that bringing people along on that journey is a big part of it. And I think finally, biggest part, I think for me, being the CAIO, is governance. So we've got to build a process in place to address the unique risks of AI. And that includes risks around data, models, things that, in non-deterministic systems that we potentially hadn't dealt with in prior iterations of AI and other types of technology, but to identify where we need to add some of the scaffolding and some of the process in place, but try to build that within the processes that we already have so that we're not building a bumpy road, but rather a smooth path for people to start using these technologies. So that's basically the strategy. I can talk more about how we've structured it, but let me turn it back to you.
As things progress beyond more deterministic models, and then what does that mean, both in terms of what it means in terms when it comes to marketplace opportunities, but what does it mean in terms of the regulator, both in terms of overseeing the deployment of more advanced AI in the market, as well as the ways in which the regulator might itself be able to take advantage of more advanced AI systems in terms of how it does what it does. So along those lines, I'm going to quote something that Chairman Atkins said recently, because I think it ties into the non-deterministic point very well. So Chairman Atkins said in a speech, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, he said, for our part, here Chairman Atkins is referring to the SEC, America's financial leadership depends on charting the future rather than fearing it. That's a point we heard some others make this morning as well. And then Chairman Atkins went on to say, AI is opening the door to agentic finance, which is exactly the point you were getting at, a system whereby autonomous AI agents execute trades, allocate capital, and manage risk at speeds no human can match, with securities law compliance embedded in its code. So that's an extraordinarily, I think, impactful paragraph that Chairman Atkins, and an extraordinarily consequential vision. So not asking you to comment specifically on what the chairman had to say, but as you think about increasingly advanced systems, more agentic, less deterministic, more context aware, more context accommodating, rapid deployment at scale, how does that factor in terms of not only the task force, but approaching these things as the chief AI officer? And I think that probably does feed back into how you're structuring the task force and bringing a plethora of different perspectives and expertise to bear, which, just to make this very compound wind up for you to respond to, your background is not only as a lawyer, but as an engineer. And you have a lot of experience at the SEC in the intersection of technology and regulation. This is not your first occasion to think about how those things intersect. You had a leading role in terms of crypto, in terms of fintech more broadly. So how is that also informing your approach to this, drawing on your training as an engineer as well as a lawyer?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think something struck me from an earlier panel is that teamwork is essential, and no more essential has it been than now. I think as we're working with AI in these systems, we realize that the teams that you have to put together to develop and test and deploy a successful system relies upon you putting the right team together in the beginning. And that includes the builders, developers, technologists, but also the domain level experts. So if we're going to build a tool, for example, and I'm not saying we are, around,
oh, come on,
reviewing comment letters, let's just say, we need to involve the people who day-to-day review those comment letters, process them. What is the human process from end to end? And can we automate where we can automate and replicate where we can replicate, and actually augment what folks are doing without replacing really key decision points and where human judgment and nuance comes in? So I think it's crawl, walk, run. I think what we're trying to do is it's a really difficult balance to stay in tune, to horizon scan and see where the technology is going and what's going to be available to us a year from now. So we're trying to build systems internally that allow for experimentation, but we want to build them so that we can extend them and we can rip and replace if we need to, and we can have composable systems that work together. We can build an application that can plug into any one of our data sets, and then we can change it a year from now as the technology is changing. So, I'm sure others are experimenting too, but there's a lot of technology now around agentic workflows and figuring out how we can employ different agents to do different things in a task, working together collaboratively, being orchestrated by another agent, and then delivering a result. I mean, this is cutting edge stuff. I'm just thrilled that we have this in the government, that we can play with it now and experiment and also build things. But we have to do it in a way that's very responsible. So the chairman's remarks are very forward looking, and that is maybe a North Star of what we'll see in the future. But we have to be, I think, building the building blocks of understanding, using the technology so that we can use it responsibly and understand how others are using it outside that we're regulating, which is also a bit of my job right now, but I'm really focused internally.
And you mentioned it takes team. An aspect of that I want to ask about, and I want to start with the recognition that I know it's still early days, but to what extent do you have the task force?
Yep.
So certainly folks with technology backgrounds, but also you think about the divisions of the SEC. So oftentimes folks in the SEC will kind of map things to the divisions at the SEC as a way to organize one's thoughts and thinking. So if you think about it, and I'm not going to be entirely complete here because a lot of offices as well, but you got division of trading markets, you got the division of investment management, you got the division of corporation finance, you have the division of exams, you have the division of economic and risk analysis, and you have the division of enforcement. So those are, I think, the divisions the commission still has, and then there are several offices as well. I could imagine it being the case at some point, maybe presently, that division directors or deputy directors are thinking through what might be the use cases that would be relevant to them when it comes to their responsibilities. So you can imagine what enforcement may be focused on, what exams may be focused on. You can think about it in terms of, say, the division of corporation finance and a filing that comes in, same thing in terms of, say, taking a look at ADVs or what have you that come in. Are you, without asking you to comment unless you're willing to and able to on any of the specifics, but the more broader perspective, are you having those kinds of, and are you expecting to have more of those kinds of conversations with the divisions where once they understand what the capabilities are, they're like, wow, heck, I didn't realize that. Boy, we can think of 10 different things that we could do by deploying AI once we kind of make sure we're able to do it in a responsible way. Are those conversations taking place?
I don't have the problem of people not wanting to play with AI or to use it. People are very enthusiastic at the commission about using AI. The problem is there are pockets of innovation happening. I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I think that I want to encourage kind of decentralized innovation to happen in development environments, in a testing environment, and experimental environment. We do have the tools for that. We've provisioned our staff with that. But then at some point, as you are productionalizing these systems, they need to come into a more enterprise framework so that we can have governance around them and they can take advantage of all the data that we have in a safe way. So I think what we've tried to do is the task force is trying to facilitate the innovation that's happening at the grassroots level in the different divisions. And they're developing use cases around what they have to do every day, which is great. But then to align, make sure that the use cases that we prioritize and really put resources into are mission aligned, that they're aligned with the priorities of the chairman and the commission, and then trying to bring those things into a more controlled environment so that we can put IT controls around it and governance. And I think so. We do have 1,000 blooming flowers, but those flowers, some of them may die on the vine. We want to bring them into a very well-tended garden so that we have some really great, kind of rose bushes growing that we can watch and take advantage of, and everyone in the commission can enjoy it. So I think one of the challenges that you see is in an organization where there are divisions and offices, and each of them have their space and sometimes their silo, is to make sure that they want to play into this theme of this is a commission-wide effort. And we want to really cultivate all the best builders and developers to come together and share knowledge and bring, all the boats up at the same time.
Yeah, I think that point in terms of it's a commission-wide effort tied to the commission's mission, I think really comes through in Chairman Atkins' remarks. I mean, as you all know, I'm about to say, and I'm sure a lot of folks here do too, chairs of agencies, commissioners of agencies, other members of government, they have choices about what to say in a speech. Right? Chairman Atkins didn't have to give remarks that included a pretty extensive set of comments on AI. He didn't have to do that. He chose to. And even in choosing to, he could have said something a little more just kind of touch on the point, AI is important and a lot of change and we're looking at it kind of a thing. He didn't. And what I read, that one paragraph, is just a piece of what he said during that speech. So the fact that he chose to talk about it and the fact that he chose to talk about it in the terms he did, as you said, kind of looking forward ambitiously, to me sends the signal that this is a priority of the commission during his time as chair of the SEC, which I think goes very much to your point in terms of making sure that folks realize, A, the opportunity to take advantage of what the chairman has set out, but that this is a commission-wide thing. You want a lot of innovation, and there's something to be said for decentralization. On the other hand, there's something to be said for making sure things are curated in an appropriate and effective way with the right controls around it, everything that you're now responsible for. So you mentioned siloing, and any organization, right? It's not unique to the government by any stretch. Any organization can find itself becoming siloed. You got your day-to-day, you have your responsibilities, you have whatever you're accountable for. And so you focus on those sorts of things. That can be natural tendency. Not only can you find that within an organization, but you can find that across organizations. So if you think about that more broadly, there's more to the government than the SEC. You think about the AI Action Plan. The AI Action Plan is not an SEC-only action plan. If you think about other EOs and initiatives from the administration, they're not just about the SEC. They're not even just about financial services. They're about a whole of government approach. What are the opportunities? What's happening, again, within the limits of what you can share in terms of cross-agency collaboration to make sure that not just if somebody at the CFTC, where the SEC may have a more natural point of connectivity, but an agency entirely outside of financial services that may be doing really cool, interesting things that you might be able to leverage, or vice versa. What are those opportunities for cross-agency kind of collaboration and engagement?
So this innovation push, it's certainly a priority of our chairman. AI is a priority of the chairman. Whenever someone stands up a task force, it signals a priority within the agency and outside the agency. And so that's good from my perspective because I get a lot of resources and attention. And you're the chairman. But, with innovation, I think the price of innovation is often either destruction or disruption, change. And change always requires change management. And so I have been empowered by the chairman and through this task force to kind of facilitate that change management. And it is a challenging part, but I think we're also getting a lot of support from the U.S. government writ large. So we've got the AI Action Plan, a big push to be AI first. We have Chief AI Officer councils, CIO councils that have very frequent meetings around implementing the directives of EO orders and action plan. We have OMB guidance and requirements that we have to meet. And so there is a big community in the government that is working to help this change come about. And it has been very helpful. So we've got, you've probably read about big tech who are doing deals with the government to provide technology and services, and that's been very helpful. There's been a lot of engagement with technology firms that are coming in and, teaching government, providing courses, providing services, and that's been helpful as well. So we're not doing this alone. We're doing it with a lot of engagement with other government agencies, with the federal financial regulators, and with industry and, academics, policy, public policy folks. Everyone wants to come in and talk about AI, which is great from my perspective.
Is there a particular, I'll use the word priority. I'm not sure that's the best word. A particular priority, a particular use case, a particular something that even at this early stage, and again, without getting ahead of where things may go, and I'll afford you all caveats that you'd like to take advantage of, that has really caught your attention as, there's a lot of really cool things, but wow, this thing is really interesting to, me, Val, based on my expertise and experience?
I think we have identified 2 or 3 areas where there are processes across the commission that impact almost every division and office that we're looking at. Okay, let's pick apart what the humans are doing and try to automate it where it makes sense. Always with human oversight, always with input and monitoring and evaluation, of course. But we're starting there. And then I'm always keeping in mind, what are we going to think about next year? Are we thinking about, can AI connect our data sources across the commission and start finding insights without us having to prompt it, with them coming, the agents coming to us and telling us, hey, you might want to talk to someone in Corp Fin because we've flagged something over here that you might want to talk to them about. So having this, this intelligent layer that's sitting over everything that's going on in our data and flagging things for us proactively, that would be a good thing. And then thinking, the year after that, can we model markets and simulate them and see what happens when we tweak a rule this way or that way? And these are just ideas. I mean, I'm not revealing things we're working on, but I'm saying I think you have to think about the things that you can accomplish now and do them very carefully with a lot of human oversight and evaluation. But then also thinking, what are we going to be doing a year from now, 2 years from now, so that as we're building these systems, we can have that North Star, that outcome in mind.
Yeah, so we could go through a whole long list of thinking out loud in terms of all the different potential use cases. But just I want to pick up on one thing you said, just add a quick note, and then we probably have time for one more question or so. But your point about the simulations and scenario analysis, whatever word one wants to use or phrase, where it's like, all right, if we change the rule, the regulation this way, what do we think the impact would be in a very dynamic way? I mean, one of the things I focused a lot on when I was at the commission is that very kind of thing. We didn't have the tools. Now from an AI perspective, that would have been amazing. But thinking about then the role of economists and data and game theory and all those sorts of things, because when you're thinking about going back to kind of cost benefit and the whole rulemaking process, I know Susan, who is here, has spent a ton of time thinking about these things, where it's like, all right, you're trying to anticipate what would the effect be across a range of market participants if we did this versus that versus something else. And the answer to that is a function of a host of dynamics, because when you change one thing, you can't assume everything else stays the same, because everything else doesn't stay the same, because everything interacts with everything else, and that creates this cascade effect. And so what's the equilibrium from a dynamic analysis versus static? That's hard to do as a human being sitting at your desk trying to anticipate. Maybe you can play that out a couple of rounds across a certain part of the marketplace, but boy, to play it out to kind of a general equilibrium, really, really hard. Wow, right? I mean, you think about the ability to do that and to do that in an extraordinarily rapid pace. That doesn't mean just because you get one outcome or another, the regulator says we're going to do that or not that, but that as an input, so then the policymakers can render a judgment with the benefit of that. It's incredibly consequential. There are a lot of folks, as you said, who have a lot of interest in what the commission is doing. For anybody, whether it's folks in this room or otherwise, who would like to be helpful, is there a particular way in which they can be helpful to you and the effort at the commission?
We have a mailbox, ask the CAIO at sec.gov. I'm pretty accessible. I come to a lot of conferences too, so I'm sure I'll run into a lot of you, but don't be shy.
All right, thanks, Val.